Welcome, everybody. This is the DVMUG Zoom meeting. This is Tuesday, October 11th, and we have a special presenter today. This is Bert Monroy. He's been with us before in person, but not since the pandemic, so we haven't seen him in a while, and he's going to show us some of his newest work. And ready to go, Bert.
Okay, so here we go. What I'm going to show you first is my newest piece, and then I'm going to show you a work in progress. Okay. And let me get down here to this guy. Yeah, okay. And I just had to switch. I just realized that I didn't have one particular file in here. So let me just go in here. This is my newest piece. Now, as I started saying a second ago, is that this is in fact, let me do this first. This is the first time I was able to do a large file. This is the first one. This is years ago when I created this particular file here. That's the first time that I blew it up to 15 by 20 at 480. This is a 197 megabyte file, as you can see there. This is the first time that I was able to get that much detail so that I can go in there and you can see, like, right inside there, you can see the little filaments on the bulbs and so on. And you can see like all the little dirt and the little wires holding the neons. So that was a big step for me to get detail. Earlier files, they were detailed, but they didn't have that much detail because of the fact that the computer couldn't handle it. So sometime later, I tried to do a one that was larger. I'm going to show you that one here. And that's Le Dome. Right here. This is one where I tried to go to full size. Oh, I don't even have the main file here. So let's do it here. Le Dome, comp, here we go. All right, this one is 22 by 22.5 by 30. So it's a bigger file. And you can see it's taking a little while. This is the once over file. But here it comes. I shouldn't even bother opening it. Yeah, this is going to take too long. Let's forget that. Let me open up a smaller version of it. Let's see. And working, dome, and sky. All right, let me go in here. I wasn't planning on showing this. Here we go, this guy. Wasn't planning on showing this, so I didn't have all the files in here. All right, so here, this one was a milestone at the time because it is 22.5 by 30. So I almost got as large as I'd like it to be. So when we get in close on this one, you can start to see some details, like get in here, you can see the little crabs and the mussels and stuff like that, all the clams, all this stuff. So in this one, I got to get a lot more detail than I normally would. But with the introduction of the Mac Studio, I was finally able to go to this guy right here. In fact, let me open this guy here, because I have one here. This is 30 by 40. And as you can see, it's 791 megabytes. So it's a much larger file. But I'm going to go to full screen here and zoom in on it. So when we go way down here, way down the street here, you get real close, you can see inside the windows, there's one of my paintings there. Here's a little bookcase over here. There's another one of my paintings. You can see way down the street, all the way down, a little car down there turning the corner. If I show up the rulers, you can see that this is not quite an inch here. There's an inch. That's an inch. Give you an idea of the kind of detail that's in there. All that is inside of an inch right there. But that's an inch. So I was able to get more detail than I've ever done before. So, and Berkeley Hills Living magazine, I don't know if any of you live in Berkeley, but just yesterday I got it. And it's a story about the woman who started this thing here. So I'm going to send her a print. But you're getting close and you can start seeing the windows, the glass on the windows, because it is raining. You can see up here that it's raining. Okay? And there are drops all over the place, like little drops dripping on the signs and so on. So this got pretty involved. In fact, here on the garbage cans, you can see there's a little splash, a little drop that just hit. See, these are drops that just hit. So I have fun with these things, creating these things to get as much detail as humanly possible in any one of these paintings. So this is the newest one. I'm going to be talking a few things about this one. And but before I get into the actual class and show, I am going to show you guys, you are the first people, except for my wife, you are the first people to see this painting. Okay, it's the one that's on my screen here behind me. But this is brand new. It's not finished. It will be finished a few hours after this meeting. But this is brand new. And I'm almost there. That's cool. And here it is, studio door. That's brand new. This is not completed. It's not finished yet. That's the door to my studio back there. That's the door. And we're getting real close here. You can see the little strings that are holding the blinds in place. You can see all the wear and tear on this lantern here. So that's the new one I'm working on now. This is not a 30 by 40. This is back to my original 15 by 20s because it doesn't have that much detail. There's not much going on here. But this is, you're the first ones to see this. It's not finished. What I'm doing now is I'm adding these little rough edges and dirt. That's one thing I've been doing, and that's what I'm going to try to finish up and add more details to these areas here. Little things like nicks on the door up here. You can see little nicks on the door. So it's getting there. I'm getting close to being finished with that. But that's the newest piece. Okay. So let's close this guy down. And all right. Why can't I close him? Okay. All right. So this guy, one thing that was bad about this guy is that they took out 3D from Photoshop. I think you've noticed that. They no longer have 3D. Let me show you one where the 3D solved a tremendous problem. And that was this guy here. This is one of the pandemic paintings. And let's see, Paris Courtyard, this one. Now you see this walk down here? You can see it getting close. See the stone walk? Okay. 3D helped with this because what I did is I created a pattern and I drew all these little stones in it and changed the pattern and it fixed this so they all look real. And I did a lot of detail on this flat painting like this. Then what I did is I turned it into a postcard and I tilted it back in perspective. Instead of having to figure out the perspective for all these different guys, I worked straight and then the postcard got tilted into 3D and I got that effect there. The lighting was painted in, but the 3D allowed me to get that kind of detail here. Unfortunately, I don't know why my Command W isn't working, but okay, do it this way. Here, that would have been really helpful up here with all these bricks, but it didn't work. I had to actually create all those bricks individually and put them into perspective, create them into perspective, especially these back here, because this whole building is nothing but bricks. So I couldn't use that 3D function to make a flat brick and then put it into perspective. I had to actually go and paint them in perspective, all the different bricks in here. There's all so many different bricks, but they had all be created individually in perspective. So what are you going to do? But I'm going to show you some of the things that how this was originally created. Now, the inspiration for this painting was, I would say, some good 4 or 5 years ago. I was walking down the street. And in fact, this is my wife and I right there. Walking down the street when I got inspired to paint this. I was inspired by the scene, but I said, maybe someday. Well, when I got the Mac Studio, I thought this is a good time to do this painting. So that's when I did the research. The only thing that was wrong with now is that it hasn't rained. so I couldn't go and see how these things look in the rain. So I had one night of rain and rushed down there in the rain to try to take some shots that I could, but it was so unplanned. It's just like, wow, it's raining. So I went, it wasn't very well planned, but I wasn't able to study the way the rain was looking in the scene. So I had to kind of make a lot of it up. But usually what happens is when I have a scene, I will take a shot of the scene of the way I want it to look. And then I will do the painting. Now, the painting doesn't always look like the photograph. There are a lot of influences. Like one of my influences was Maxwell Parrish, who has very strong colors in his paintings. So what I did is I see that you guys are seeing yourselves there, right? So let me just take this guy and put it over there. Okay, there we go. So, so my colors are a little more involved than what you would see in the photograph. And I also add a lot of different little touches here and there that are not in the photograph. Things that, like when I just zoomed in on that painting back there, the photograph, you couldn't see this at all. You couldn't see this building because it's night scene and so on. So I make up all the stuff that's in these rooms. I just put stuff in there. There's my Fog City. And there's that painting that I just showed you a second ago. See? At this size, you can't see anymore, but that's that Paris courtyard I just showed you. But I'll go in there and I do the research. Now, this being here in Berkeley, I went down to the scene during the day and shot what this little sign here says and what this little says inside here, what these things over here look like. I did a lot of close-ups to see what these things look like, so I know, have a point of reference. I don't always have the ability to go and visit the place. Like if I did my painting Amsterdam Mist, I could go back to Amsterdam and take a reference shot, so I rely on Google Street View. So I'll go to that place in Google Street View and walk down the street and stop in front of something and zoom in on something and take a picture of it. So that's helped me a lot. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you the subjects, the way I studied this particular painting. And I'm opening up Bridge. And yeah, okay. All right, so there we go. So we go to art. Wow, there's some weird stuff going on here. Let's go in here. And wow, this is some strange stuff. Okay, so let's just do it on my let's go in here. All right, so let's see let's go to folders. And 5 to go. Sorry, I'm doing it this way because I wasn't expecting these kind of little problems just now. But we'll go into Jazz School, which I know has to be in here. There it is. Okay. So here's my reference. I'm organized. I have Jazz School. Here's pieces. Pieces will be things like across the street, building 1. These are all the individual the art for each of these. In reference, I also have all these different things here, building 2, building 3, and so on. So like, for instance, building 2, you can see where I've done quite a few shots. These are shots that I took of the building itself. And then down here, you see screenshots. These are the ones that I did from Google Street View. Okay, so there's, if I just need to very quickly see that the whole front, how these particular doors work, I don't have to go down there and shoot it. I could just go to Google Street View and take the shots from Google Street View. So everything gets across the street. You can see all the different parts and what the close-ups of things that I will take. These are screenshots, as you can see again. These are shots that I took, and these are screenshots. So I rely on my own photography and Google Street View to do all my reference. Once I have all those pieces, I start to create the elements, like building 2, which I was just showing you. Here's the building itself. Now, this is a big file, so I'm going to try to open it and try to talk for a little while it's opening. But this is the actual working file. So these are massive files. So if it takes too long, I might just have to stop it. But on the Mac Studio behind me here, it opens pretty quickly. But on this guy, yeah, I don't think it's even worth it. Forget it. These files, that's building 2 right here. This is building 2. This building here, I had to do it in 2 pieces. I have the brick facade and I have the first floor. And then I have these 2 signs. They are separate files. These are all separate files because of the fact that if I do them all in one, it's just far too many layers. Let me try to open up this bottom piece. That might be a little easier. Let me open this up. Hold on 1 second. And art, jazz school, pieces, building 1, facade, brick 1, that's the bricks. Here you can see some of the, you'll see there's a brick pattern right there. This is the facade and first floor. Now I better do it in here. And jazz studio. Art. Jazz school. Pieces. I think it's time to get a new laptop. Okay, brick texture. It's building 1. Here we go. This is the problem with working on such big buildings. Here's floor 1. Hopefully this will open a lot faster. Oh yeah, a lot faster. All right, forget these opening up these working files. These working files all are in the multi-gigabyte ranges, so it makes it a little harder. But you can see that every element here was done in its own file. So all the research is done via photography or Google Street View. So now let's talk about how they actually get created. So I'm going to close this guy down because it is big. So let's just close it so it's not in its way. So now, one place where I start is Illustrator. Illustrator, I call the pencil on the canvas. Photoshop becomes the paint. So Illustrator is where I start to create all my elements. Now, in a piece like Times Square, it was really important to start in Illustrator because Times Square is 5 feet by 25 feet. Really difficult to create in Photoshop. I had to create it much smaller, but I can create all the elements in Illustrator because Illustrator is the most important part is the perspective. So I'm going to show you. I'm going to open up the perspective. Now I can rely on a folder that I have where the files were created. Okay, on my desktop, here we go. Demo files, AI. So here's the original perspective for Times Square. There it is. Now, we'll see that the vanishing points are way out here. Remember that this is 5 feet by 25 feet. Now, it is being created much smaller. Now, the reason I have this measurement down here is so that I know exactly what this size is. So if it's 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm still working and I'm getting a little fuzzy in the head, I have it right in front of me that I'm working at this resolution here. Okay, so every element is in its own layer. So we go in here, you see the island and down a guy, Mr. Softy truck, the swank, everything is in its own layer. But because of the fact that it's so wide, I had to do an Illustrator for many reasons. And one most important reason is that the vanishing points down 46th Street on either side are so far away that I'd have to create a massive file in Photoshop to be able to handle those vanishing points. So that was not the way to do it. So I do it here in Illustrator. So you can see there that the vanishing points are way out here and way out there. So I was able to create all the different pieces. If for some reason some of you have never seen Times Square, let me quickly open it. And it should open quickly because it is a I have it in here. And demo files and art, and there's Times Square right there. This will take a couple of seconds, but it started off much faster. Times Square was something I always wanted to do. Since I was a kid, I wanted to paint the Times Square, but I could never get it quite right. It was the introduction of the 64-inch printers that made me realize that now I could do Times Square the way I wanted to, which is big, like Times Square itself. So here's Times Square, and this took 4 years. Now you can't photograph this, because when you photograph it, like let's say this building back here will just be a big dark thing with little orange squares. Whereas when you pull in here real close, you can see that there's stuff inside the building. You couldn't see that in a photograph. A photograph wouldn't be able to zoom into my daughter's eye over here and see the reflection of what she's looking at. So this took a long time to do. It took 4 years. And everybody in here is somebody that I know and family and so on. And here's the two guys who wrote Photoshop, Tom Knoll and John Knoll. There's people from Adobe. There's my wife, and I'm taking a picture of her. And yes, she's in the camera too. See, there she is. So everything in here was created. And this was a case where Illustrator became crucial to create all the different things. Now, because the perspective is important. Now, when we look at this particular file here, I'm going to come in here, zoom in right here to this little area here. See all those little lines right there? A whole bunch of little lines. What are those? That's right here. Those are the vents on the Mr. Softy truck. See? If they're not following the same perspective, even the untrained eye is going to see it and see that something doesn't look right. So I create perspective lines for everything that I create, so everything's going to fall exactly the way it should. So Illustrator is where I start. Illustrator also has a lot of other functions that Photoshop doesn't have, which is why I create their things there. Let's close this guy down, and I'll show you some of those. One of them is, well, here, this is the Novotel. This is that building I just zoomed in on. See, there's the Illustrator file for it. Now, what's really cool about Illustrator is things like this. I can create, say, there's a little window, right? So I want that window and I want another one. So I'll just copy this over, right over here like that. There's two of them. Then I hit Command D, like that. And I get, what the hell is that all about? Okay. And then I get this. I got those four, and I can drag them down here. I say Command D, so I can very quickly create a whole bunch of paths, which then I bring into Photoshop, and then I create the basic shapes and fill them up using those paths as my elements. So I create them here in Illustrator when they're that complex, and those get brought into Photoshop, and I immediately will put some into a layer. And I'll stroke them and call it guides. And then on individual layers for the windows, for the shades, and all the other stuff, I will then use those paths and then start creating the elements inside. There's another very important thing that I use Illustrator for, and that is the fact that it has a blend tool. A little different from what you would expect from a blend tool like in Photoshop. And that's this function right here. Now this is a, let me pull back a little bit. Okay, there's a painting I did called Lights in Munich. And there's a building that has all these windows, except it's not straight on, it's at an angle. So I created all the bases. You can see they're all individual paths. And I colored them here. I don't usually color them in Illustrator unless it's some little bottle or something. I usually don't color. I colored them here so that you can actually see what's going to happen. So now they are grouped as one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this down here and put it down the line here a bit. Let's go down here and put it all the way down here and put it right on the baseline. Now it's taller. Since it's further away, my perspective, the window is going to get smaller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink it down so that it's right in there. Let me get a little closer. I can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to do it so that that line is right there. They are right there. there. Okay, that's pretty close. All right, so there's the two windows. This one's a little smaller than the other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select, I need two more windows in between. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of those and come over here and say object, and here's blend, make. There, now I did a whole bunch of them. So I'm going to go into my blend options and say that I want a specified number of steps, and I only want it to be 2. Click OK, and there's the two windows, and you see that they are getting progressively smaller, following the perspective line. See, the point is right on the perspective line. So now I have the windows in the proper perspective without having to create each individual one. I just create one, duplicate it down, shrink it into the perspective, and then blend the other ones in between. So it's functions like that that make Illustrator my pencil on the canvas. So I create a lot of the elements in Illustrator because, one, it's resolution independent, so I can create something really small and then blow it up when I need it in Photoshop, as you saw the perspective lines. It just allows me to go in there and create a lot of tools. Like there's a scissor tool to cut a path, which you don't have in Photoshop. There's a join tool to join ends of path, which you don't have in Photoshop. Photoshop does have a path tool, but it is somewhat limited. So I do rely on Illustrator to create a lot of the basic elements that go into the paintings. Now we can quit out of here. And let's go back to Photoshop and start creating stuff. Oh, Command W work now. Okay, so one of the most important things of Photoshop for me is layers. Now, I remember the first time I saw layers. Adobe brought me down to Stanford University and stuck me in this room full of cameras, brightly lit with a giant mirror in front of me, which I knew was a two-way glass. And I was in there by myself. And there were people behind that taking notes and such. And they said, go ahead and open Photoshop. So I opened it up and my eye went right to it. Layers. I saw it in the menu. I said, oh my God, layers. I'm gonna open Times Square again for a reason. Oh wait, it's right here, isn't it? Yeah, there it is. You open that. Okay. And I started playing with the layers. I remember the first question I asked was, how come I can't select more than one layer at a time? But, and they all started laughing. That automatically, I knew who was behind it because I recognized the laughs. But layers not only make me create all the basic elements and all the intricate parts of it, but I'm basically creating a kind of like a photo stock library, except there are illustrations. So I have a little stock library that I can use quite often. So I'll give you a case in which that was very important. So I'm going to come in here and zoom in to this area right here. I believe it's, let me see if I can remember where it is. And there's a garbage can. I know it's in here somewhere. I haven't seen that garbage can in a long time. But there's a garbage can in here somewhere. And there it is, right there. See that garbage can? Okay. Now, that garbage can, I realized I had done that garbage can before. Now, before the meeting started, we were talking about a painting called Damon. Here's Damon right here. So, see, there's a garbage can. I already did the garbage can. There it is. So I didn't have to recreate it. What I did is I went to the original Damon file. And there's a trash can. There it is. Now you'll notice that in my layers, right there, here we go. Come on, open up. There they are. There's the shadows. So all I had to do is eliminate those shadows. Oh, not the body. There's another shadow right there. Okay, because all I wanted was the garbage can, different lighting in Times Square, so I didn't want all those shadows in there. So once I had what I needed, I went in there and I took this, and up here, I'm going to hold down my Option key and say merge visible. Now, if I just say merge visible like this, see, it just, all the layers went away. Let me undo that. I'm going to say Option merge visible. And you see, it created a new layer, leaving the layers intact, and it created a whole new layer. There's the garbage can. So all I had to do then was to go into hue saturation, say colorize, bring it into the greens, make it much darker. And there's my garbage can for Times Square. See? That easy. I know, why did it still take you 4 years to make Times Square? Well, there's a lot more than just a garbage can. But layers make it easy for me to have a stock library of elements that I could then put into other places. And I do that quite often. If you ever go to an exhibit of mine, then you might see some element that, hey, I saw that in that painting over there. It's because I will reuse certain pieces. Instead of having to paint them all over again, I will add new shadows or reflections or whatever's necessary to change it for that particular context. But the basic elements come from different places. I do everything in layers, and I keep those files as independent files so I can reuse them. Okay, so there's a garbage can, there's in Times Square. Okay. Now, there's a lot of functions to layers, and one of them, which I love doing, is layer styles. Now, layer styles can be so useful for so many things. The little water droplets I showed you on the window of the, in fact, let me create a little water drop right here. Let me go in here and just create another layer right here. And I'll draw just a little circle. Let me do it with a paintbrush. And okay. And get a nice hard edge, and maybe not that big. Paintbrush. Okay, so I just draw a little drop there, and let's make it white. Draw a little drop there, and I got to lower the opacity. All right, there we go, and another one there, and there. Okay, so now we have 4 little drops of water, but they don't look like little drops of water. So what I'm doing is I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to bring down the fill opacity, not the opacity. The opacity will bring the entire opacity down. The fill opacity will bring down the opacity of the actual content of the layer. But anything I do to that layer in layer styles will be at 100% because the opacity is still at 100%. So now what I'll do is I'll give it a little bevel and emboss. See, I'm going to soften it up so they're a soft edge like that. And I'm going to give it a little more depth so it's a little stronger. And I'm going to make this a nice white like that. And I'm going to make this one a white as well. Now it disappeared because it's set to multiply. But if I change this to something like, say, let's say we use hard light here. See what happened? So now I got these nice little shapes here. It's like, okay. And it looks more like a little water drop. And I can very easily go in there and say, drag this guy up a little bit. So it's a little drop that's falling down, see? So layer styles allow you to do all kinds of cool effects, but sometimes they'll save you some time and get something just right. I got this little ink bottle here, and I want it to have a little shadow. Now the ink bottle is sitting on a table, and there's a light source here. So it should be casting a shadow. Now, normally, back in the old days, before the computer, I'd have to go in here and start drawing. And before layer styles, I have to go in there and start drawing a shape that would be the shadow. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go into the layer and say, give it a drop shadow. There's the drop shadow. I can change its position, change its distance, all that good stuff. But what I'm going to do is just that, none of those things matter. I'm going to click OK. I have a drop shadow. Now that I have that shadow, I'm going to come up here to my layers and go down to layer style and go down to create layers. Now here, this is turned off on my machine, but this is just a disclaimer, just in case you have a file that has like 6 different layer styles and they all have different modes and so on. When you send them into individual layers, they might not work the same. So that's why this little disclaimer is here. But my drop shadow is a straight drop shadow. So I say, okay, do it. So now you see it's a separate layer. So now I can select that and I'll go into my transform and I'll just say, let's bring this guy over. Let's bring this over here like this, move the whole thing into position like that. Click OK, and there you see that now I have a drop shadow and I can even bring down its opacity a little bit. So it's not so strong. And there's a drop shadow being caused by the ink bottle. I didn't have to redraw it. I just used the actual shape of the drop shadow of the drop shadow to create the perspective that I needed for this particular scene. Okay. Now, there's a lot of other things that happen here, the layer masks and things like that, which I'm going to show you a couple. Let's get out of here. Now, a painting that I did, the first painting I did during the pandemic is this one here. You guys might recognize this scene. Yeah, there we go. This is the first painting I did after the pandemic. And we're getting real close. You can see that there's little birds flying up there and a little plane up here, a little plane flying. And I want to get in here to the, well, here, you can see, yeah, there's people down there see, looking. And here's all those people down there. Those are people from Times Square. I didn't have to redo them. They were all people down there. Of course, that tiny, it wouldn't take much detail, but you can kind of you can see shirts, you can see heads. I didn't have to do that. They're all like a single pixel. But because they do have a lot of detail, when you shrink them down that way, they are going to rasterize to the point where you could just about make them out to be people out there. So I'm going to show you the Salesforce tower here. And you can see how you know that the Salesforce tower curves on the edges like this. And it does have this mesh on the top. It's this mesh of metal. So I'm going to show you how that was created. I utilized an important function of the layer styles and of layers rather, to be able to create that effect. There we go. Now, there's the mesh. There's the mesh itself. And you notice it's a little more defined here because again, I'm working at 200% of what I need. So I create the elements, then they get brought over. I make a composite layer like I did with the trash can, and that gets brought over to the composite file where I put all the elements in place. Now, the mesh, if you notice, is going straight across. See, it's not curving. It needs to curve around this edge here, but it's not because it's a straight pattern. It's just a pattern that I created in here. So let's go look at the layers and you'll see that we'll select this pattern right there. And there you can see it. It has a mask. All right. All right. Here's the pattern here. See, there it is. It has a mask. If I turn off the mask, you see that the pattern goes all the way out. But the mask is allowing it to be seen only inside of the building area. And you notice that there's a link. That's sort of automatic. Anything you do to the layer is going to affect the mask. Anything you do to the mask is going to affect the layer. In this particular case, I want the mask to remain untouched. So I turned off the link. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select an area of my my thing. In fact, let me do it with the lasso so I can go at an angle here. So I'm going to select an area like this. Now, you know there's a mesh in here, but it's hidden by this. But if I go in to start this, it's going to affect the pattern itself. So I'll go into my tools here, and I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to just bring this in, but I'm going to do it with a warp. So I'm going to go in here and say transform warp. I'm going to drag it in. Bring this guy in and bring this guy in. I'm going to turn off those marching ants so we don't see those. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag these guys in like that, and then bring these guys around You can see that I'm starting to get that shape that they're wrapping around. I can bring these down just a little, so they follow that curvature up there, and these can come down just a little, so they follow that curvature. And there you can see that now they're going around. Click OK. Pull back a little bit, and you can see that that particular area, they're wrapping around the building. I took my time when I did it and got it perfect, but there you can see that they are wrapping around because the mesh went all the way out. The mask is allowing it to be seen only where I want it to be seen, but I was able to manipulate this area out here, brought it into here to give me that shape of the curvature of those little holes. So the masks allow you to show and hide parts of the image. They are 8-bit layers, so they have 254 levels of gray in between that black and white. So if you have a 50% gray, it's going to expose that area by 50%. Okay, now, let's close this one down. Now that same concept that I just described about the levels of gray and stuff is a thing called alpha channels, which I'll get into in a little while, but remember that concept when I show you alpha channels. That's a different kind of mask. And then we got this guy here. Now here's the creation of a mask. Now this is that French scene I showed you before, Le Dome, though I modified it. This is the restaurant in back, and I put the truck in front. Now, this truck is parked in front, right? I want to see what's behind it. I want to see through this glass. Now, I remember when I went to show this to somebody, they said, well, why don't you just make the layer of the glass transparent? Well, this is one file. If I made that glass transparent, then you would see the body of the truck, because that is one solid shape. And this particular shape right here is in itself a clipping group. So the steering wheel, the glass, and everything inside there is inside of this shape. So making this guy transparent would simply allow me to see that shape solid. See, so if I go in here and the truck is solid here, but it is a solid shape. So when I created it, I made the windows a color that's easy to select. So what I do now is I got the truck, I'm going to give it a mask. Now the mask automatically is white. If I held the Option key, it would have been black. So I'm going to go in there, and now I'm going to go back to the art right here, and I'm going to select those areas. Select the window and the little part there. Now I go to the mask itself. I'm going to Option click on it, so I'm seeing the mask itself. I got black. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to say, fill it with a 50% gray, or I could say, let's fill it with the foreground color at about, say, 40%. Click OK, and there it is. I can deselect it, right? Now, when I go back to the art, now you can see through the glass. See, because I'm masking out that part of the truck with a layer mask that has gray, just enough gray to make it look transparent, but it still looks like there's glass there. So that's the layer masks, which allow you to go in there and do some pretty cool effects to individual layers. Okay. Moving right along. How long do I have, by the way? Anybody?
As long as you want.
Oh, okay. Well, I haven't
Well,
had
no.
dinner at around 6:30, so we'll quit at about 6:15. Okay, no, I'm only kidding. Only kidding. So let's get back to demo files, and let's see. There's more things. So if I have time, I'll come back to more things to do with layers. But I got a lot of things I want to cover here. So let's get into some brushes. Now, I create a lot of brushes. In fact, let me brag here a little bit. Let's open this guy for now. Okay. when you go to your brushes and you go into this, the panel of brushes right here, here's all the basic brushes. Down here is a bunch I've created, but these three right here, dune grass, grass, and maple leaf, those are mine. I created those. I have a whole bunch more that are in the groups down here in my azalea brush and all kinds of floral brushes that I created when we were designing the brush engine. I was brought in on that because I'm one of the few painter alpha testers who work on this stuff. And so a lot of the brushes that I created ended up in the program, and I was really happy to see that these three made it to the main page, made it to the main group. And I've seen the grass brush used a lot, and the maple, and I've seen this guy a few times. But the grass brush, I've seen in all kinds of commercials. So it's pretty cool that people are using it. Now, creating a brush. Now, remember Fog City that I showed you a few minutes ago? Fog City had all that fog. Now, to create that fog, I created a brush. Now, I can create a brush by just drawing something, but in this particular case, I wanted something smoky. And instead of spending a lot of time trying to make it look good, I just looked for a picture of clouds. And this picture was fine. This picture was great. So what I did is I went to my alpha channels here, my channels, and I looked for the layer that's going to give me the most contrast, which I know is going to be the red. Okay. The green gives you the most detail, and the blue, that's where all the garbage is. That's where the film noise, all that good stuff, film grain, that's all in the blue channel. So if you're ever doing some very specific retouching, you could attack individual channels instead of affecting them all, which distorts the color. If you want to get a little more detail and you want to sharpen things, don't sharpen the overall image because you're going to sharpen the noise too. If you go to the green layer, that's where the detail is. Just sharpen the green layer, not the others. So you can choose individual layers. Now, I'm going to choose the red layer because this gives me the most contrast. And I'm going to zoom in on this little area right here. Now, what I'm going to invert it. Okay, now a brush, when you create a brush, where it's black, that brush is opaque. And whatever color you use, a red or green, it's going to be a solid red or green. Where that brush is white, it will be completely transparent. Any level of gray will be a level of opacity. So if you use a 50% gray, even if the brush is set to 100%, that brush will be 50% transparent because it wasn't created with a solid color. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go into my levels, and I'm going to bring in those blacks a little more and bring in the whites to the point where they disappear in the back. All that other stuff disappeared. And click OK. So now I'm going to take a white brush and I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to paint this area here. Now, I would really take my time to get it rough and stuff. In fact, let's give it a little softening here, just to soften this. This way it gets a little softer. Now it's going to be a little blurry on the edges, but it doesn't matter because you're going to see the main thing working. Because there it is. There's my brush. So I'm going to go with select it right like that, and say define brush preset. There it is. So now I'm going to create a new file here. And let's do that one. In the center, and I'm going to invert it. And I got white. So the brush is automatically going to reflect what I created, right? So let me go full screen here and get my paintbrush, and it's going to do that. Doesn't quite look like smoke. So I go into my brush settings. I'm going to increase the spacing so I can see individual tips. And I'm going to go into shape dynamics, where I'm going to play around with the angles like that and change the size from tip to tip. Click OK. Now when I start to draw, I'm going to make it a little smaller. Let's say we have a little chimney here. So we're going to see the smoke coming out like that. Now I'm going to bring down the opacity to about 50% and make the brush a little bigger. And then I start doing this. Make it a little lighter, down to about 30%, make it even bigger. And here's the smoke way up on top here. And you can see that now we have smoke. Now, yes, you can buy a lot of these brushes now, but if you know way of making a brush. Sometimes you don't have to waste all this time on searching out brushes and then buying them. You can just create your own brushes. It's just a question of understanding what you want that brush to do, and then taking a photograph or creating a shape like I did with the leaves and so on, and then turning that brush, using the brush settings to do whatever it is that you want it to do. Okay. Let me open up a painting here and show you some stuff that went on. This guy here. This is Window in Rome. And there it is. Now, this is an old building, like most of the buildings in Rome. And I'm going to full size here. And you can see that the wall has some damages in it. See the damages? On both sides, there are all kinds of damages in the wall. Those were done with a brush, but a certain special effect was necessary. I'm going to pick up this color here. Let's get this orange. And let's close this. And we got this guy, so let's just fill it with that orange. There it is. So I'm going to create the wall here. I'm going to go in there and give it a filter. Right off the bat, I'll give it a filter. So go into our let's put it into a new layer. Okay, there we go. Filter gallery. How come the filter gallery isn't working? Oh, I love it when things don't work. Let me see the mode of this. This is an RGB. You create a new file. Sometimes things don't work the way they should. And oh, a CMYK, that's what's going on. RGB. Create. Okay. So that with the color. So when something isn't working, you really need to look around and see what's happening there, because it usually is user error. Okay, and that was user error. That file I created was CMYK. But Photoshop doesn't wake up in a bad mood. If something isn't working, either there's something wrong with your machine or user error. Look around and something's set wrong and so on, so it's not working. So now there's filter gallery. Okay, doesn't work in CMYK. So I'm going to go in here and find what I want. There's many different things, as you can see, many different styles and textures and so on. I'm going to go to texture and I'm going to go to texturizer. Now it has quite a few types: sandstone, burlap, brick. I'm going to use sandstone. And I'm going to make the scale, it's pretty big now. And I'm going to bring up the relief just a tiny bit. And the light's coming from the top left. See, I can make it come from the right. It changes everything, but we're going to keep it from the top left, like that. Click OK. There it is. So now, in a layer on top of this, I'm going to start to damage it. I'm going to use black. I'm going to get a paintbrush. I'm going to use an existing brush. I'm going to use one of the spatter brushes. One of these guys right here, like say, we'll use 39. Come over to here to my brush settings. I'm going to give it some spacing. Go into this, make the size a little bigger so you can really see what's going to happen. I go into my shape dynamics, say give it a little size jitter, and definitely the angle all the way so that it's giving me all these different shapes like that. Each tip is different from the neighbor. So I'm going to go in here and start to draw a little shape in here like this. And my opacity is at 30%, so let me bring it to 100 and make the brush a little smaller. I'll just draw a little black stuff in there, a couple of little black ones in here, a little black one there, and maybe a big one right there. Okay, now I'm going to make it really small, real small, and just draw a shape like this. And that's a crack. Now, it just looks like dirt. It doesn't look like a crack. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that layer and bring it into the layer styles. And the first thing I'm going to do is bring the fill opacity down to 0. So they disappeared. Remember what I said about the difference between opacity and fill opacity? So now I'm going to give that a bevel and emboss. Okay, and I'm going to say, let's go with the smooth. Okay, there it is. And let's bring this guy down so it's not so strong and make this guy black, and set it to multiply. Okay, so there we see we got all these little bumps. See, now the light's coming from the upper left. I want them not to be bumps. I want them to go in, especially the crack. I want them to go in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse the lighting on it. And now they're going into the wall. See? So now when I start going in here and I start drawing another crack over here, and maybe get this a little bigger and start drawing other shapes, you can see that they're starting to get little cracks, little holes, and so on. If I create another layer and do a nice little bunch right here, give it that same layer style, go into the layer style, and go to bevel and emboss, bring and change the direction of the light to that way, and go back over to the blending options and bring down the fill opacity. That one you see is coming out of the wall because it's casting a shadow. See? So now it's got bumps and holes going into the wall. Now I used brushes that were brought down in opacity so they didn't look so strong, but you get the feeling here of what's happening is that I'm creating bumps, and in this one, I'm creating holes. It's just because of the way the light was set up, let's make this one a big hole like that. And there you can see. So that you can see the difference in the direction of the light. It's an illusion that's being created to make something look like it's coming at you and something going away from you. It's just the way the light is affecting each one of these layers. And the roughness of it was because I used a spatter brush. Okay. Let's go out of there. And it's already 4 o'clock. Let me do one quickie little thing here. Let's just throw this away and make this white. There we go. Okay, I'm going to do a brush here to create an effect again. So I'm just going to take create a little shape like this. Okay, and I got black. I'm going to get my paintbrush and use a hard edge brush like this. Make sure the spacing is set to 0 or 1%, so it's a solid line. Click OK, and we'll make it smaller. Real small, like about like that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and in a new layer, let's do it in a layer. I'm gonna go ahead and stroke that. I stroke it. In fact, let's make it a little thinner. Just a little bit thinner and stroke it. There we go. So I'm gonna select that and make it a brush. So now I'm actually creating a shape from scratch. Define brush preset. There it is. So I can throw it away. So when we go in here and we take that brush, it does that. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to make it smaller. And I'll get a nice color, like a nice golden, kind of golden rod. There you go. Nice color like that. And it does that. But when I'm going to go to my brush settings, I'm going to go in here and say the spacing, let's give it enough spacing so that they're just separated. Just like that. And I'm going to go into my my shape dynamics here, and angle. I'm not going to do this kind of thing. No, I'm going to leave the angle as is, but I am going to modify the control. I'm going to set that to direction, and you see what just happened? Now they're all following a nice shape. So when I go in here and I draw a nice little shape like this, I'm creating a nice little chain, which I can now go into the layer styles and say, give that a little bevel and emboss. Let's make this a nice deep orange color. Nice deep orange like that. And this one will make a nice kind of a light yellow. Okay. Bring the size, the softening and the size way down. It's just a little bit there like that. Just a little tiny bit. And we'll give it a little drop shadow, which will lighten it up a little bit and bring it over to the side like that. And there you see that now we have a little gold chain. See how easy that was? Okay. So now, I mentioned channels before. So channels are really important. They are a way of masking, but not masking to see, but masking to affect. So let me just show you what I'm talking about. All right. Right here, we have a billboard from Times Square. Now, this is a billboard in the scene, and there's a shadow being cast from the street down below right here. So I have it right there. There's the billboard, right? So what I'm going to do is on top of the billboard here, I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to select a shape right here. From there, up to here, there, and fill it with black. There it is. Now, I want to see it, this shadow right inside of this, so I'm going to clip it. You see that the dirt is clipped here. See there's some dirt? I'm going to clip it. By holding on the Option key, I can clip it. Clip. And now it's clipped. What's happening there is it's using the active pixels of the base layer as a mask for all the layers in the group. That's called a clipping group. Now, this shadow, if you look at reality, I look at things, I study every little thing and see how it works. Sometimes I make models for myself on how things should work. You'll notice that as a shadow, a long shadow like this, as it gets further away, it's going to get softer. So I can go in there and say, well, okay, let's go in there and say, give it a Gaussian blur. And that's a lot. So let's just give it a little bit. Let's say about maybe, let's try an 8. 8, that looks pretty good. In fact, that's a little too much. Let's go with a 4. That's good. Now, it should get softer. It gets over here. If I apply the filter again at a higher rate, it's going to affect the whole thing. I want it to affect this area, a lot up here, less here, nothing here. So I have to create a very specialized mask to allow me to do that. That's what's called an alpha channel. So an alpha channel, you notice I have a few here. When you select something, okay, and this is important. Let's just say you're creating a scene for somebody, and and there's no clouds in the sky. The sky is blue, and the client says, "Oh, I'd like to see some clouds up there." Well, you can select the blue of the sky and get a photograph of some clouds and stick them in there. Okay, and you show it to the client. There's your clouds. And the client says, "I don't like those clouds. Can you make it more like a sunset?" Well, it was easy to select the blue sky with the magic wand, but now that you have all those clouds in there, it's not going to be that easy. So when you made the original selection, and you'll notice that my selection has a little bit of a feather to it. If you make the original selection and you go over here to select and say, save selection, it gives you this. You can name it, make it a new channel. You can even send it to a new file. So when I say, okay, there it is. Go look at it. There it is. It has that little feather. So it's a saved selection. It doesn't affect the art in any way, but it is a selection that will allow you to do things to that art based on what's exposed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a blank channel. Blank channel is automatically black. I'm going to look at the guys above it. I'm looking at it. Now, the default on an alpha channel is red. The last time I used an alpha channel in this machine, I obviously changed the color. I'm going to do that now to what you would normally see. Here's the color. It's red. Click OK. And normally this is set to 50%. Okay, so we have created an alpha channel. We're seeing it with the art in back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the gradient. Now, remember, white exposes the art. Just like in a layer mask, you can see the art. Black hides it. Level of gray, level of exposure. So if I draw a gradient here with the black up here, the black down here where I don't want it to be affected, going up to the white up here. There it is. Let's see it. There's my mask. So now we can turn it off. We don't need to see it. But we go back to the artwork and we load it. So I select this guy and load it. Come back over here and it's showing me the marquee from the 50% gray to the white. So I'm going to just hide the marching ants. I'm now going to apply that filter. I go straight from the beginning here, just go here, and now I'll go a little slower, and I'll do it again. And things are not the way they should, so let's just do it this way. Filter, do it again, do it again. You see how it's getting softer? Down here, it's staying the way it should, but each time I apply that filter, it's getting softer on the top to the point where over here, it's almost completely softened. So it's applying the filter through the layer mask, applying the effect gradually based on the level of the grace. So alpha channels can do all kinds of special tricks. Sometimes they can solve other things. Like for instance, here's a situation where we have a ring. Okay, I'm gonna make that ring look three-dimensional. So I come over here, let's close this guy down. We go over here and go to that ring and give it a little bevel and emboss. Let's make this white and normal, and let's make this black. Multiplied, let's set this to screen the way it usually is. Okay, so I'm gonna go in there and make them a little stronger so you can see that highlight. Let's make them a little bigger and soften them up some more. And click OK. Let's bring this guy down a little bit. And there he is. There it is. Nice three-dimensional looking ring. It looks great. But what happens if we all of a sudden have another light source? Now this light source is really close to the object, which means it's going to be very bright here and not so bright over here. And it's further away. The layer style is going to apply it evenly all around, because that light source is way back up there somewhere. So what I'm going to do now is create a mask that's going to allow me to get the effect that I want. So I'm going to go in here and make the ring a selection. I'm going to save the selection. Save selection. And I'm going to call it ring. I'm going to save it again. This time I'm going to call it edge. Deselect. We go look at our alpha channels. There's the ring, there's the edge. Now, it's a curved ring, so we need to soften that edge. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm in the edge layer, so I'm going to go in there and apply a little Gaussian blur. I don't know what the number was before, so let's just do a new one. And we'll do that. Looks pretty good. That's good enough right there. So now, there's the other guy on top. Now here's a good time to change the color of things. So I'm going to go in here and change this guy to a blue and bring up the opacity so I can really see it, the difference between the two of them. There you can see the difference. So what I'm going to do is the ring stays where it is because it's synchronized with the image right in place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the ring here. So I'm going to go in there and select this guy and move him over. Just like that. Going to expose this little edge right there, which is where the candle is, right there. See? In fact, let's move it up just a little bit down, just a tad. There we go. It's exposing that area, exposing this area. Now I need the mask. I have two masks. I need to turn this into one. So I'm going to come up here to a little thing called calculations. Now, many years ago, in 1996, I co-wrote the first book on Photoshop, written in 1989. It came out in 1990. And in 1996, there were more books than registered users, but nobody anywhere was talking about calculations. So we put out a book called Channel Chops, which explained channel operations. That book is out of print, but you can get copies and it's okay. It doesn't matter what version of Photoshop you have, the concept is still the same, because we were talking about what is happening in these with these features. So what I'm going to do, the position of these is going to make a difference. So I got the edge here and edge here. So I'm going to go over here Here's a merge. What I want to do is I want to put the ring here. And there's the edge down here. There's the edge. It's exposing that area there. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to take the edge and put it up here. Oh, and by the way, I have to change the mode too. Instead of multiply, I want it to be subtract. Now, right there, before layers and layer styles, way back with Photoshop 1 and 2, this is the way a drop shadow was created. You created a mask, an alpha channel, and there you can see the drop shadow. So the position of these does make a difference. So if I put the edge up here and put the ring down here, now you see the area that's exposed on this side. Send it to a new layer. Okay, there it is. It's gone to a new channel. So now I can come over here. I'll create a layer on top of that, and I'll make this channel a selection. And you hide those marching ants, and I'll get a nice bright yellow like that. I'll get my paintbrush, and let's get a nice soft edge brush with that one. Just make sure the settings are good. Yep, everything's good. I'll come over here and make it much bigger. And I'll just draw right there. There's that light. Come down here, make it a little smaller, and maybe bring down the opacity to about, say, maybe 70%, and draw a little shape right there. And there you can see that now we have the lighting effect that we needed because the candle's there through a specialized mask that allowed me to control how the tones were going to be put in. So it makes life a lot easier than having to go in there and try to finagle all these little shapes and so on. I'll do, let's see, I'm going to do one more thing with channels, and then I'm going to do filters, and I think we're way over time, but that's okay. Right? It's okay? Okay. Let me do one more thing with channels because it's cool. So let me, I just do it right here. Just throw these guys, let's see these guys. Now, right here, I want some type that's going to be kind of curving, kind of curved. So I'm going to go in here and type in the word baby. B-A-B-Y. Okay. Now, there it is, kind of big. So I'm going to go into my thing here and say, let's make it much smaller. Let's bring it down to about 60. Oh, no, let's make it 260. There you go, that's better. And we'll make a nice bold. There it is. So I wanted to be kind of a rounded type. Okay, let's make it 300 just for that. Okay, so I want it to be rounded type. I could spend hours finding the right font and so on, but this is kind of what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the type a selection. Oops. What's this outlet? Go away. All right. I'm going to go over here and save the selection. I'm saving it to an alpha channel. I don't know what this thing is here. Bring it over there, out of the way. And we don't need to name it, just there it is. So I can throw it away. I don't need to type because I had that alpha channel. There it is. So what I'm going to do to the alpha channel is I'm going to blur it. I'm going to blur it a lot. Just to the point where I start getting those rounded edges that I want. A little more round. No, that's too much. There. Very nice and round. Click OK. So now I go to my levels. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to tighten them up. Bring in the darks, it gets thinner. Bring in the whites, it gets thicker. So when I got the thickness that I want, right about there, I'm going to bring them real close together. So now they're nice and sharp. And there it is. So when I go back to my artwork and I load that and I put it into a layer, now let's say we pick a nice kind of a yellowish color, something like that. I can fill that in and I can give that a little layer style. like that. And we got a nice little bubbly type. See? Doesn't take a lot of work. It's just knowing what's going on in here. Okay, I'm going to talk about, I'm going to show you two things, well, three things with filters, and then we'll be done. Right? I can keep going, right?
Can take all the time you want.
Oh, have a good time. Okay, so let's say goodbye to this. Say goodbye to that. Okay, let me open up a file. This is a painting I did a few months ago, actually early last year, when I think of it. This one here, Sunset in Bodega. It's just to show you how simple things can be. This is a Bodega Bay, and it's a sudden setting, and I'm going to come in real close here, and you see the ocean waves out there? The little ocean waves. Okay, they weren't that hard to do. Okay, so right here. Okay, over here, I'm going to create a sky like this. And I get a nice color. Let's get a blue. Blue like this. And going to a lighter blue. A lighter blue, say like that. And we'll just throw a little gradient into the sky there, just like this. Okay. Oh, and I still got a little feather going on with my thing here. Bring that to 0. Okay, so now down here, this is going to be the water. I'm going to put it in another layer. And here I'm going to go with that blue, but I'm going to reverse them and make this one a dark blue, really dark blue like that. And down here, I'm going to throw a gradient. This is going to be our water. So now, I need those little waves. So what I do is I'm going to create a new layer. And I'm going to fill that layer with black. And I'm going to give it noise. Add noise. Got a lot of noise. Now I'm going to get in close and watch what's going to happen now. I got all this noise. So I'm going to go in there and I'm simply going to apply a filter to that noise. Now, I like to tell my students that layer styles, filters, they all have names. Forget what they're called. Look at what they do. They give you all these controls. The name sometimes might mean something, but you can do something with that. In this particular case, I'm going to use a filter that has a certain name, and I've used it thousands of times, and only twice have I used it for what it's called, and that is motion blur. I go to motion blur right here. And I'm going to go, it's going horizontally, so I'm going to give it really small, about like that, just a little tiny bit, just like that. I'm going to go into my levels, and like I did with the type, I'm going to go in there and just kind of do this kind of a thing. Make those lights lighter, make those darks much darker, just like that. Okay, so now I have this on top of things, so let's pull back so we can see the whole image. I'm going to change the mode of this. If I make it multiply, they're going to be all these little dark lines. If I make it screen, going to be all these little light lines. Let's go with the light lines for this one. Okay, so there it is. So now what I'm going to do, let me pull back a little bit, is I'm going to go in there and I applied my transfers. So I'm going to drag these down like that, and I'm going to drag these guys out. So now when you start to look at the little waves, you see that the ones in the front are much larger, and the ones going further back start to get a little lighter and a little smaller, which you can then go in there and lighten or bring down the opacity a little bit, or apply layer mask so they're not so strong back there. And then you can apply another one where you have the blacks working through. But there you can see that I created the little waves of the water by simply using noise and a motion blur. Neither of them talk about water, but it's just how you use them that's going to give you the effect. Now I want to do a couple because they're just so much fun. I'm going to just show you something here. And I think I do have filters. Yeah, trees. Okay, here's trees. It's a bunch of trees. That scene I showed you before, Fog City, those hills are covered with trees. Now, the trees were picking up the sunset, so these trees are in layers of their own. So what I can do to make that sunset hitting the tops of the trees, I'm going to go up in there real close up here. I'll show you how these trees were created in a second. I'm going to pick some colors here. I'm going to get a nice color like that. These are the sunset colors. And I'm going to get a nice orange. Let's say like a little warmer, like that. Okay. And in a layer on top of that, which I'm going to clip. Then I create, oh, hold on. I'm going to show them in the right layer. This guy, yes. Okay. Layer on top, which I'm going to clip right here. There it is. Let's get real close. I'm going to take my paintbrush and use one of those spatter brushes. I created it before, so there it is. Make it smaller. A little smaller. There we go. And I'm going to go into my brush settings and I'm going to go to color dynamics. Color dynamics and have a switch apply per tip. A foreground to background jitter. In other words, it's going to jump between the foreground and background colors. No, very little hue change, but saturation a little more and a little brightness, so that each tip is going to be different from the one next to it. Purity, if I bring it down this way, it's going to bring down the saturation. Bring it up that way, it's going to bring up the saturation. So I'm going to leave it right at the center. So now that I have that, I'm going to go in here, and in that layer, I'm going to start to paint with a Torm 100% brush right there. I'm going to start to paint right inside there. Am I in the right place? Let's see, is that this guy? No, it's not that guy. This layer, where's this layer? Yeah, it's not that layer. Hold on, let me pull back and find that layer. It's got a lot of trees here. This is the file that in which I created all the trees so that I had a lot of trees to work with. Oh, it's those. I don't want those. I want these. How come this guy? Oh, auto select isn't working. That's why. All right, let's bring this guy here and clip it with that one. Okay, so now we're getting close. Oh, look, see something happened there. Okay, so let's get in close. And I'll go over here and I start to get a smaller brush and I'll start to paint. And I'll start painting right in here. And you see that I start getting all these nice little colors in there. So it starts to look like certain leaves are picking up the sunset and so on. See? It's a layer of its own, so it can be brought down in opacity and so on. Now, those trees were created with the tree filter. There is a tree filter. I'm going to open up another file and show you the tree filter, which is this guy here. Okay, now, in a layer, I'm going to go in here and let's bring this back to black and white. And I'm going to go here and under render, we have tree. There. I can control the amount of leaves. I can put a lot of leaves on it, see, like that. I also have a lot of different kinds of trees. See? Many different kinds of trees. Right now I'm using an oak tree. Okay, I can control the colors of everything. I go over here and I can control the different, use a custom color. So let's just say that I wanted it to be fall. So I can go in there and say, pick a nice orangey color. Click OK. And now my tree will be fall. I come back over here and say, give me less leaves. Okay, so yeah, so now it starts to look more like a fall. See? So I have control over all that kind of stuff. And for my branches, There we go. And let's use a kind of a really dark color. Okay. Do it. There they are. Okay. So I can create a tree, click OK, and there it is. But let me undo that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my tree filter. And I'm going to take leaves and bring them down to none. Click OK. I got this tree. It's going to be like a Halloween thing. Halloween is coming, so maybe you might get inspired to do some kind of a little card for the kids or whatever. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this tree, I'm going to enlarge it a bit and put it over here. A little larger. There's this tree. Okay, now it's a full moon. It's a little cloudy, but it is a full moon. So that tree should be reflecting that moon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that tree and duplicate it and make a copy of it right below. I'm going to lock the transparency and fill it with white. Okay, so now you kind of saw what happened there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this black guy's on top. There's a white guy underneath. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the white guy and with my cursor keys, I'm going to just move it up a little bit, a little more, a little over. A little more, a little over. Then I'm going to give it a mask in which I'm going to go in there and get a soft edge brush that I used before. Yep, that's good. Make it much bigger. And just hide that area of the tree. Bring down the opacity a little bit to about a 30% and slowly start to soften up some of the other reflections so that we're getting only those highlights at the top of the tree where it's facing the moon. So that tree filter, there it was a specialized kind of a tree. And to create the effect of the moon being reflected, I simply duplicated it back and filled it with white and then shifted it over a couple of pixels to give me the effect of the light reflecting on the branches. Okay, so it's 4:33. Are there any questions?
There you go.
I can't go
Open
off
up the questions. That's a lot. That's a lot.
That's a lot. Okay. When we do
Anybody
one
got
more,
any questions? They can raise their hand or unmute yourself.
So from now on, they should call you Bob Ross of Photoshop.
that's a happy little tree right there. I have been called, and somebody else gave me a shirt once with Bob Ross and it said "Happy Trees," and yeah, when it's interesting because many times in many conferences I've said I'll make some happy trees, and the laughter usually comes from people with gray hair. So a lot of young people are like, I don't know Bob Ross, but the older people, oh, they get the happy trees kind of concept. But yeah, well, thanks for that that concept.
Those tree filters, those are built in.
They are. That's built in. Yes, it's written by this young guy. God, I forgot his name now. I haven't talked to him in years. He did a few different things. He did the tree, all those things that are on the render. He did on that special section at the top of render. He did borders, all kinds of really cool stuff. Look at some of that stuff. See these guys up here? Flame, picture frame, and trees. Those three he did. So you play with those. You'd be surprised the kind of cool stuff that you can do. You can create all kinds of floral frames and everything based on his thing. So it just makes things a lot simpler. And the fire, I'm gonna let you play with that one. See what that can do. It creates flames.
It's got clouds built in. Is that any good?
The clouds filter.
You like to make your own?
I'd rather create brushes rather than the clouds filter, because the clouds filter just gives you overall clouds. If you just want, puffs of clouds in the sky, it's better to create them. The clouds filter, actually, let me show you a cool thing about the clouds filter. The clouds filter, I've used the clouds filter, believe it or not, to create marble. Here, watch. I'll go in here and I'm going to create a another layer, and we'll fill that with white. Okay, and I'm going to give it the clouds filter. Now I want you to notice something too. But remember, I talked about the option button, how it changes things. It's not always written down, but the option button, always play with things using the option button. Whenever I get a piece of software that's new, I will hold down the option key and run my finger across the keyboard. Okay. And oh, what was that? And I go and I find a lot of Easter eggs that way. So now let me show you the clouds filter. So I'm going to go over here and say render clouds. There's the clouds. Now, let me undo that. And I'm going to hold down the option button and say render clouds. See the difference? See how much more contrast there is? So by holding down the option button, I get contrast. Now that I had that, I'm going to create marble. I'm going to apply to that filter difference clouds. And apply it again. Oh, keyboard things. Apply it again. Apply it again. Until I find the marble texture that I want. And there's a nice marble texture. And if I want, I can go in there and say, go into hue saturation and say, colorize it, bring it into the green. And I got a nice green marble. There you go. See? So I use combinations of filters to create all kinds of textures. So don't waste time on Google looking for all these things that you need. You can easily create them once you understand all the things that the program has to offer so that you can do things. On that note, let me do one last thing. I've done most of the things I wanted to do, but let me show you this one. Because it's going to incorporate a lot of different things and bring a very important point. And that is filters. Filters do things. Where you apply the filter will make a difference. Okay, so I got this rusty nail here. It's in a layer. So what I want to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say, got to be in the layer. There it is. I'm going to apply a filter to it. I'm going to go into filter gallery. I want it to look like rusty, and there's that stones texture I used before. We'll use that. But there's rusty, right? I'm going to go in there and give it some layer styles. I'm going to give it a little bevel and emboss, but I'm going to use a chisel hard, and I'm going to use a kind of a color like that. And for this, I'll use a brown. Use brown like that. Maybe a little deeper. Okay. And chisel hard. And make it smaller. Let's take away the softening. Make it a little smaller. Like that. Maybe a little bigger. Let's go to 8. All right, that's good. And I'm going to apply satin. Okay, satin is going to give me this because I have a contour. I usually use that contour with satin to get all kinds of nice effects like that, to give it all that kind of a messed up look like that. So now there's rusty type. Now I want it to really look rusty and worn. So I'm going to apply another filter. In filter gallery here, I'm going to go over to brush strokes here and use spatter and click OK. And what did it do? I made a little roughing, not what I wanted. Why? Because that's not what I want to do. I applied it to the layer, right? I don't want to apply it to the layer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select the text, make it a selection, and save this, not save the selection, but give it a mask. Since I have a selection, the mask is going to reflect. Here's the mask. What was selected. I'm going to apply that filter to the mask. So I go over here, go to filter gallery, and we can see it. There's the spatter. You see what it's doing to the mask? So I'm going to go in there and give it a little more smoothness, but give it a little more radius like that. Click OK. See what it did to the mask? Which, when you look at the art, go to the art. See, now the art is rusty. So by applying the filter to the mask and not to the art, it gave me the edges that I wanted to make it look like it's all rusted and worn away. So it's where you apply the filter is going to make a difference on how things work. Okay. So hopefully you guys learned a lot of stuff there. Let me do this. So then I can see me. So hopefully you were inspired to go out there and do some cool stuff and play around. And the best way to learn this thing is to sit there and play. Now, when I first saw Photoshop, I was the 8th person to see Photoshop 2 years before Adobe. There was no manual. I co-wrote the first book. There was no YouTube. Remember that? YouTube solved everything.
There was no internet.
Yeah, no internet. And every piece of software before that, and I see a lot of software before it gets released, there are no manuals and so on. So I have to sit there and push buttons, see what they do. So I always had to learn that way by playing. So consider it a video game where you're not killing things, you're creating things. So just sit there and push those buttons and hold down the option key, hold down the command key, hold down the option command key, play with all those buttons and do things. And you'll see that all kinds of effects that aren't always documented are available. And a lot of them are Easter eggs, which the program, Adobe doesn't even know are there, but programmers stick them in there. There was one in Pixel Paint a long time ago. I don't know if you guys remember Pixel Paint. About Pixel Paint, if you held down the option button and clicked with the pencil, it created a tree. Random trees, just like the filter in Photoshop now. And I did a thing for a article cover page for Macworld, and it was Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water, and it's surrounded by trees. So I did all these trees. So I'm on the phone with the guys from Macworld, and they said, "Oh, those trees, they're incredible. How'd you create them?" I said, "That must have taken a long time." I said, "No, I used the tree Easter egg." I said, "What trees?" They had no FaceTime, so I'm talking on the phone, right? So I said, "Hold down the option button and click with the pencil tool." All I heard was, "Oh," word 4-letter words. "Oh," there was a lot of people in the room watching this thing. So they were all really surprised at how I created all those trees. It was just option click with the pencil button. If you option shift click, the trees were made with whatever was the foreground color. If you hit option shift click with the pencil, you get trees that were the foreground color with berries of the background color. Cool little feature, never documented anywhere. And well, it went away with Pixel Paint once, it went away back in the days. So.
Okay, Bert, that was fabulous. You're very generous with your time. Nobody got any questions? You're probably always sitting there with your jaws hanging down, which you can do.
That's for sure.
He's scratching his head
I
there.
think we're overwhelmed.
Oh, well, sit there and play, and then you'd be surprised at the kind of stuff you can create. And like I said, here, let me show you some. Hold on. I think I still have it. Remember I told you, I said that sometimes I make models. Remember Fox City, and I zoomed in on the Sutro Tower? I made a little model because I wanted to see how light was going to affect the different pieces of it so I can study it so that when I painted it, I can get it right. So I made myself a little model. See?
You really couldn't go take pictures of what that was going to look like in full scale, right?
I did take a lot of shots, but there's a park. I forget the name of the park, but it's on a hill across from where Sutro Tower is. I went there and took a lot of shots to see what the houses look like and stuff at the base of the tower. But when I was actually doing the tower, then I realized, oh, these shots don't really tell me because of the time of day that I wanted to get, which was the sun was starting to set. So I did this much easier than getting in the car and going over there and starting to try to get the right shot. Whereas with this, I was able to just set it up with lights and I could just study what was going on. And that way I was able to get what I needed. So sometimes I will create little models for myself so I can study the effects or how the shadow works and so on. So these are all little things that I've been doing my entire life, even before computers.
Cool.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll let you go. We'll stop the recording. It'll be on YouTube, and then that'll be a self-contained little demo with first part before you started, and after this talk about the food thing or whatever we usually do, it'll be separate.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, guys. Well, it was
Thank
good.
you very much,
hanging
Bert.
out with you.
Okay.
And I look forward to seeing what you guys are doing. And my email is
If
bert@bertmonroy.com.
you want, I put you on our weekly mailing list, and you got one of those. I can leave you on there, and we can keep sending you our weekly emails if you want.
Yeah, do
Right.
that. And then I'd like to see if somebody's created something. I'd love to see.
Yeah,
the
you
other.
can see what we're doing. So I'll just leave you on there anytime you want to go off. You can just unsubscribe if you don't want to be on there anymore.
Cool. Okay.
O-
I'll see you
Okay,
guys. Hopefully someday we'll have dinner again together.
someday.
Yeah,
hopefully.
hopefully.
Okay. Take care.